favorite rescue story?
Is Candy. She is now finishing her heartworm as a 5-year-old gray pit bull who was a stray with possible distemper, 6 puppies, and fought just to be here. And now she's the happiest, most loving dog. There's nothing better than that.
Been involved in a lot of cool rescues when I was at the shelter, but I think my favorite one recently is Precious, because she was so misunderstood at the shelter. She was struggling with her mobility. She's a senior pit bull who's just barking, standing in her kennel barking, and that gets misconstrued as aggression. I picked her up for an event and I just couldn't take her back. There were cruelty investigations against her owners. She was darted to be brought into the shelter due to claims that she was aggressive. And she is just the sweetest pit. She absolutely adores everybody, and she's kind of socially awkward. She does bark at people when she meets them, but she doesn't have an aggressive bone in her body. Just being able to help her and get her the prosthesis and see her like really move.
It involves a dog named Ricky. I just happened to see him when I was up at the Fort Worth shelter volunteering. He looked very, very sick. He was just curled up on his bed, very emaciated, not eating. So I took him out for a little playtime, and he was just in a bad way. So I decided to take him home with me. Texted Melissa. Of course, she said yes. Like let's get him to the vet. And he ended up having a pretty bad pneumonia. Was on antibiotics and nebulizers, and after a couple weeks, just how resilient these dogs are. And after being neglected and sick, and yeah, he bounced right back. He was such a gem, and he got adopted by a great couple.
I ended up foster failing one of my favorites. Sky was a 6-week-old, 6-pound puppy that was found running on the streets of Fort Worth. She was non-weight bearing on her front right leg, so we thought she got hit by a car. She was at the shelter for a couple of days when I went ahead and went and picked her up.
You picked up 2 at that time.
I did pick up 2.
You went there for another dog.
I did.
I saw the puppy.
I went there for another dog, and I saw her, and we did several vet visits, lots of medication, and it turns out she has something called HOD disease. I ended up foster failing her, and she's a 1.5 years old, and she still goes through her growth spurts where she has problems walking and getting around, but overall she's blossomed into a 72-pound gorgeous dog.
To me, it would have to be Giselle. She was last call. Didn't know she was dog aggressive. Didn't know much of anything about her because they hadn't dog tested her because of her hip. She was in pain. She went through FHO surgery. Recovery was surprisingly easy with a lot of help from Fort Worth Abandoned Animal Lines. Just everybody being there for support and kind of walking us through. And then she was our first dog that we had to get through heartworm treatment. She had a lot of issues that we had to get through.
Poor Melissa got phone calls from me all hours of the night. I don't know what's going on with her, because it was our first heartworm. And so she went through and she was she got dehydrated and all that stuff because she was drinking but not enough. And the good thing about Giselle was Giselle loved ice chips. And so I could give her ice, and that was the only way that she would we could make sure she got
still loves ice to this day.
Yes.
We had her for, she was adopted by her best friend. They knew they wanted her right away, but we still had her for 8 months because of just getting her through everything.
It was a long time.
And close second would be Rose. Was attacked with a previous foster from the shelter and lost an eye in that. She was dog selective, and it just took finding the right people, and she is living the best life now. She gets belly rubs every night. She gets a treat every night, and just before she'll even go to bed. So her family loves her to death.
We had her over a year.
We had her a year.
Yeah.
So there was this quarter, and she got shut down. We picked up 3 dogs. 1 left that same night. 1 left the next day. And then the other one kind of got stuck with her. Then she kind of grew on us. Sky. We had her, and we kept asking for fosters, and nobody ever stepped up. So we kept her till the day she died in my arms.
She's one who died suddenly.
Yeah. She had extreme heartworms. Her heart failed, and she died.
Favorite memory that I have is we did a pool in Arlington at a house that was like a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom house. They had 28 dogs in the house. We were contacted, of course, to see if we could help. I had never experienced a situation like that in my life. That house smelled horrid. They had never been outside. They had never touched grass. I forgot how many we took in. I think it was probably 12, 15 dogs at that point. It was crazy. I took one initially. My husband told me, don't come home with a dog, and she never left. I knew the moment I met that little baby that she wasn't going anywhere. I ended up taking in another foster because we had one left that no rescue would claim, and I threw my hands in for it, and that was Sophia, and she ended up being deaf. It was my first deaf foster, but I miss her. She was a transport. I've touched base with the rescue. She got adopted by a couple, and I stayed in touch with them for a little bit. They got sick and one of them passed away, so they actually surrendered her back to the rescue, but then she got adopted again. Transport was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's gotten easier over time.
Milo, of course.
Yeah.
How can you not love little Milo? 15 years old, decrepit little chihuahua.
We were gonna have it for like a week or two,
I thought
max.
when I brought him home, I brought him in the door with Ben and I said, I'm pretty sure I'm going to euthanize this dog tomorrow.
There's been more than one dog that was brought home that was like, it's gonna be for the night, and then I'm probably taking it in the morning, and then usually those dogs, you know, last 2 years and demand love and attention. You talk about the Energizer Bunny though, right? He just keeps going and going and going.
We're very attached to each other.
I think I have to choose Kobe's. I'd get in big trouble if I didn't choose him. So I met Kobe at the Fort Worth shelter the day before he was supposed to be euthanized. Me and another volunteer were up there dog testing dogs, and he was one of many dogs that we dog tested. And that next morning, about an hour before he was going to be euthanized, I realized no one was coming to save him. And if I wanted him saved, I was going to have to be the one to do it. So I reached out to the rest of the board and told them, you know, I think this is a really good dog. I think this is a dog we can find a home for. And they immediately tagged him. I went and picked him up at the shelter that day. We didn't have a foster for him, so I was taking him to boarding. I go and drop him off at one of the boarding facilities we use, and he immediately jumps the fence and is right back standing at my side, happy as can be. So I left him there reluctantly, but I could not stop thinking about him in the next few days. So I went and scooped him up as a foster, and then fostered him for, 8 or 9 months. He got adopted once and was returned 2 days later because they said he was depressed and wouldn't come out of his crate. 2 Christmases ago, we made it official and foster failed him, and he's been a part of our family ever since. He's taught me so much about dogs, about training dogs, about living with power breeds, high drive dogs. He's really just turned my world upside down, what it means to be a dog owner.
Maybe a couple. So one of my second foster, so emaciated that I could count every bone in her body. And I'm just like, who does this to a puppy? Like, I took her in for some groceries, right? And some love, and kind of got to see her, get healthy. And then also getting to see her just like figure out how to be a puppy. And like my 2 girls that I had then, Ruthie and Lulu, kind of helped her figure out how to be a fun puppy. I look back at pictures of how skinny she was, and I'm just like, I don't know how much longer she would have had if we wouldn't have taken her in, because she was so skinny. That's one of my favorites. And then I've helped with a couple of different hoarding cases. So I drove to Hamlin once to pick up some dogs. I was just acting as transport for these dogs, but I had the day off and I wanted to help. A total of 31 dogs, but he could only catch 23. And I took 6 with me. In my tiny hatchback Hyundai Elantra. I had the front passenger seat laid back with a big crate like in the passenger seat, and then a big crate in the back seat. And I will tell you what, those dogs smelled so bad that I think to this day my car has never quite smelled the same. And I had the windows fully down,
Oh my God.
with half the time my head just like hanging out the window. It was definitely not the most fun that I've had helping Fort Worth Abandoned or animals in general, but I'm glad I got to help them